All right, welcome to the great Eve Down Under AMA with our lovely CCP representatives. The first one up is Kigali. Go ahead, sir.
G'day, Kigali, brave newbies, brave collective. My question is relating to the current state of the game. Appears to be, well, the current state of nullsec appears to be a collection of giant blue donuts where everybody is trying to turn your sandbox into a car park. Diplomatic agreements going around and making friends with these guys, and non-invasion agreements and bluing up with these people is actually making everything straight lines and destroying conflict in the game. What have you got for us? How can we turn it back into the sandbox that we know and love?
Okay, so is this not working? I'll just talk loud. So there's a couple of issues there.
Hello.
It needs to be on the stream. You don't talk that loud. Like the whole world does not hear you, Kevin.
Okay, I can try though. Okay, so there's a couple of answers to that question. Do we have a concrete plan that we're moving on right now? The answer is no. But do we recognize that it's a problem? Yes. And the reason why it's a problem is in some ways game design. It's also in some ways just player behavior. Winning in an economic game, oftentimes the best way to do that is not to go around and start a bunch of fights. And so we are looking at game design options to change it, and we're also looking at social options to change it, and sometimes the two will cross over. So I guess the direct answer to your question is yes, but no specifics have been decided yet.
If I maybe comment a little bit on why I believe it is the case, like what are the conditions that brought this about? I think we have, over the past 7-8 years, been giving too many tools to nullsec alliances to increase comfort. I think the first mistake was to symmetricize the mineral distribution, where people became self-sufficient for their resource acquisition in its region. The game was actually concretely designed to be the reverse, so that you would never be self-sufficient. So you would have to have access to the whole map, either through aggression or pact making. I think that's one condition. I think the soft system has been like stagnant in a way where everything has kind of settled into a certain comfort zone. I think there are growth dynamics in the game. The game is maintaining its player base. It's not growing. And when you have a fixed map and a growing game, you almost force elements to untopple pretty regularly. And I think these conditions combined have brought about the stasis we're watching now. And I think if you systematically start to unwind that, we need to quote unquote fuck up with the mineral distribution. We need to do something with the soft system, which is, I don't really have an answer, but I think it's providing too much control and comfort. And then I think there are elements like how the local chat system creates even more mechanisms to provide control. I think we have to systematically unwind some of these things to bring about conflict again and make it scary again. And I think we need to get moving on that. And I would rather do the wrong thing and cause havoc rather than just watch it in fear and just, what should we do? So I don't like the idea of kicking the anthills and just, or put them aflame, but in the absence of any better idea, that is what needs to happen.
Next question.
Hi. So part of it's I'm from South Korea, so many Korean player like part of it's about you, about worry about you. So because part of it's made a pay to win system, so it will affect you. So and transfer when people CCP service on Japan, that is a complete breakdown. So same happened to be worried about Korean translate. So we worry about that. So part of is interest in your server technology, not EVE Online IP. So that is Korean game press worry about you. That is 17-year-old. It's too late to come Korean. So many people, Korean press said, Korean player doesn't interest EVE Online. I hope more Korean guys come EVE Online, but they will not. Will know.
Because of Pearl Abyss, Korean players will not come.
I'm Korean player.
Yes, I realize, but if you could maybe ask the question again so I can better understand. Is your concern about even Korea, or is your concern about
Translate will probably.
about the translation? Yes. Okay. So so here would be my answer to that. So Pearl Abyss has an irrational interest in EVE Online. And we, us and Pearl Abyss, are willing to do irrational things in Korea because of my irrational interest in Korea and their irrational interest in EVE Online. When we were working on the Japanese translation with Nexon, the problem is the economics of maintaining the translations didn't uphold. The ROI of maintaining the Japanese translation, it's very high to maintain a high quality Japanese translation. So we shut it down. I do not think it will happen with the Korean translation because it is not necessarily done for business reasons. It's done for the purposes of CCP and Pearl Abyss working together on a project that we want to be successful on. So I would say the conditions why we're making a Korean translations for EVE Online are built on a mutual interest in bringing together even Korea that are done so in an irrational way. So even if we don't have tens of thousands of people from Korea playing EVE Online, if we have a few thousands, that will allow us to work together on a project which both companies are extremely excited to do. And it's mainly done out of a massive petitioning by Pearl Abyss employees demanding that we have a Korean translation of even Korea. So that would be my answer. So have faith.
Excellent. Jurikati from Havoc Corporation in Tesla Lines, please ignore. My question is, with the recent production of the breakdown of players banned for bot-like behavior by CCP Pellegro, when are the community in EVE going to get an NPC base within the drone regions to help you deal with these bot menace? So
I like your question about the NPC base in the drone regions because it's extremely solution-oriented. I did not realize that that was a way to address it. Shame on me, I'm very stupid. But I learned about it last night. I think it's an excellent doable solution, which we should absolutely consider. Because the challenge with proof of work in EVE Online are quite enormous. And I think we have let it slide for too long. And now that we're taking action, we're seeing a whole host of issues coming out of the woodwork. But I like your question because you're phrasing it as a solution.
Thank you very much.
I did not realize. I'm sure some people in the Eve design team have probably had similar ideas.
One thing
I think we have
One thing I will
plenty of
say is-
ideas as well for how we can tackle botting, and we're working closely with the CSM on that to get their feedback and also find the solutions that we can, try to figure out and help with the botting situation in EVE Online. Sorry, I cut you in there, Kevin.
One thing that I will say is we are considering that solution, but it is not the only solution we're considering.
Thank you.
Matthew Fontana from Brave Collective. I'm just curious if in the early days of investigating VR... Hi, Matthew Fontana from Brave Collective. I'm curious if in the early days of investigating VR, you ever put together a test build of a VR client for EVE Online itself and how it went.
We did talk about that, but we did not do it. The main challenge is that we have our own proprietary 3D engine for EVE, and it's a lot of work to have that work on VR, and it's work that requires kind of unicorn resources, which are usually busy in EVE Online backlog work. Valkyrie was very much our first step in doing spaceships in Unreal 4. And we're doing the same with EVE Ether Wars, where we're using Unreal 4. I think at some point in the distant future, we might even consider Unreal 4 for EVE. Right now, EVE is better at doing spaceships than Unreal 4 is, but those guys are really good at improving their engine. I think there will be a point in time where Unreal 4 will outclass even our own engine once they've done some things which I know are on the roadmap, but are not high priority because not many people have the problem we have with tens of thousands of people duking out. So we talked about it. I think EVE would make a good VR experience, especially sort of passive activities like mining. There's a kind of a hypnotic aspect that happens when you're kind of sort of serenely mining. It's almost meditational. So we did talk about it, think about it, but we never moved on it because it would have required people that are usually busy improving the engine for EVE Online and not for VR.
Thank you.
Michael T. Ward, Blackout Syndicate, wormholer by the way. Well, Alliance bookmarks win.
I'm glad that my voice is not working so that people can't actually hear what I'm going to say. This is something that I know you guys have asked for a lot. We have some ideas cooking in the background that we are hoping to get out sooner rather than later. It's just a matter of, I don't know, how do I say this? There's some things that we work on as pet projects that we know really deliver to certain desires of the community, I suppose, certain wishes of things that you guys have asked for a long time. They often take a sideline to other bigger things because we need to look after the whole community. And so there are some things that we've been working on the sidelines. I can't say when they're coming out. I can't say if they're going to answer what you have in your mind about what Alliance bookmarks are, but there are things that are being worked on that I hope we'll get into your hands sooner rather than later.
Thank you. And maybe to add to that, because I have a mic, and I also have a voice. Sorry, Sienna. So, I mean, it's a little embarrassing to sit on panels for decades asking about the Alliance bookmarks, and we never really have a good answer. It's pretty fundamental in the whole of the EVE architecture why Alliance bookmarks are extremely difficult to make. It involves a construct we created 20 years ago called the DB row, and that has certain limitation which Alliance bookmarks, and frankly some aspects of EVE mails, rub up against extremely critically. So while Alliance bookmarks sound like a little same, we have core bookmarks, why can't we have Alliance bookmarks? They like trigger this weak point in the architecture. Able to do them well, we actually have to create a whole new construct on how you manage persistent state in the database over to the user interface of EVE Online. It is done with a system called the DB Row, which is extremely efficient and allows EVE Online to be so sophisticated in terms of like its excellence in space. But Alliance Bookmarks push it beyond its limits. So we have to take a pretty fundamental re-architecting on some of those interaction patterns to be able to do them well. And that's why we are choking on it as much as we have. So that is the answer. It's maybe not a great answer, but that is the reason why we are taking so long to tackle this. It's not because we don't understand the problem, are aware of the need and all that. It is just, it triggers a whole cascade of things we have to do, and to invest the work in doing that, we would have to forego a lot of other things in the meantime.
Thank you for your answer.
Hi, Van Deen of Event Horizon, part of the Watchmen. My question's regarding the Sisters of Eve. We're wondering if those hotties are going to give us any capitals.
Can you say that again?
Sisters of Eve, SOE, are they going to give us any capitals? Yeah.
So if we were releasing new ships according to our new company guidelines for how we're making announcements, I would not tell you. I can tell you, though, that if you look at everything that we've said this weekend, you should be looking at Triglavian ships in the near future. Sisters of Eve is beloved, and it's not off the table, but it's not on our immediate roadmap.
Hello, I'm Gavin Onasi from Tickle. The release of Triglavian ships from concept of idea to actually releasing in-game, can you guys tell us a little bit what that process looks like, or the work involved? The release of Triglavian ships from initial concept to actually releasing in-game, can you guys talk about what that process looks like and maybe some of the work involved?
For the art or for the hulls themselves? Like are you talking about the design of the new Tech 2 ones and their performance?
Well,
in
and the
game?
Tech 1 ones, just from the concept of we're going to release Triglavian ships to getting them released in-game.
This will be size matters.
Yeah, so I know too much about this game. So so there were many constructs that went into the Triglavians. One of them is that we have another system like DB Row called Dogma, and that is the system that manages all the attribute boosting, it's all the attributes and all the effects. And we had not made a new weapons effect in a long time, and we wanted to explore what is a different weapons effect from like lasers and hybrids and projectiles and all the current weapon effects we had. And the system underneath is actually extremely capable, but it's very difficult to author new weapon effects inside that system. But it's very, you can do a lot. So CCP Rise is his name? Dev name, yes. Remembering all the dev names is sometimes a struggle. I just know them as people. Yeah, exactly. He looks like that, indeed. So he came up with this concept of the time ramping up, or the damage ramping up over time. So the elements were built around that. Okay, we want to leverage this new weapon effect to make new weapon systems, to make new skills. So that was one strand of the inspiration. The other strands had more to do with the art, but they came together in this kind of the way, it's probably the best example where we designed something end to end from, okay, here's the weapons effect, here's the graphics and the construct to match it. So when you look at the ship, it all makes sense through and through. A lot of the early spaceships of EVE Online, the actual gameplay of them and the look of them were kind of sort of retrofitted together after the fact, because we had designers and artists working in isolation, and then it just kind of came together, and then we saw that doesn't really fit, does it? And that's why you see turrets kind of just like they're juxtaposed on some of the ships. I won't name any names. But with the Triglavians, it started with this weapon effect. The art was built around it. And that's why they are as cool as they are.
I might add to that, and I don't know if I'm spoiling something or not. Rise and Pointy Bits worked on that together. Pointy Bits was one of the concept artists on the graphics and audio side, and has since moved on to new projects for him. But they worked together and came up with the idea of the entropic disintegrators. And that's not right, is it? Yeah. And originally that was going to be a weapon system for anything. It wasn't just going to be for Triglavian ships. And then the ships came out, and then the design team working on the turret for the EDs pushed it towards those ships specifically, and then it became a Triglavian weapon system specifically because we developed that orb that came up off of the hull. So then it sort of it started general, and then it became more isolated and more specific until it was just that. But the tech that was laid down in the design of it is there. And so the technology in New Eden for these things is present. And so it's possible for other races or other types of ships potentially to develop similar weaponry within the world of New Eden.
Part of the design process was also the feel that we wanted for the NPCs in that particular in SL space, and some of the gameplay we really wanted to have in the NPC groups. And so while that didn't force our hand at all with the design of the abyssal ships, it did give us a little bit of guidance and encouragement in different directions. I know at the time we also looked at perhaps breaking away from some of the established, I guess, tropes of the universe. So every race has 2 types of E-War, except Kaldari, and all of that sort of thing. And we thought maybe these guys don't have to comply to all of the standardized rules across the different races.
Hey guys, 47 from Tactical Supremacy.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Should we sing? Happy birthday to you! No, I'm not doing
My
it.
ears really don't want to hear that.
Someone take this.
I've just learned to take like a 10-second pause every time. So my question is about Rorqual's skill injectors and the sort of exponential growth of basically money and assets. Do you think you guys have gone a little too far with the ease of access for being able to go from 1 Rorqual to 2 to 4 to, et cetera, and the fact that this is contributing to the excessive amounts of like Titan supers and all those kind of things that are just blobbing the hell out of the game right now? The fact that I've been dropped by a 3-day-old Titan character is kind of concerning. So do you guys think you've taken it just a little step too far? Are there any plans to maybe look at that, or do you just enjoy making us hate our lives?
Working as intended.
So anytime that you attempt to do an action in EVE, or really in any game, and there's one and only one logical choice, we need to consider doing some design work. And right now, mining is in that position to a large degree. So we've actually had several conversations about exactly how we're going to address it, and we don't have a firm plan yet, but it does need to be addressed. We recognize that. We need to sit down, pull all the mining ships out and go like, what reason do I have to use this one? What reason do I have to use this one? And when we answer that question, then we'll have a basis to answer all the other.
What about the injectors? Because that seems to be the key part of it. Because that's where you get the multiple Rorquals in one go.
So having the skills to fly a ship is not a problem if the ship is balanced.
I'll take that.
So it's actually great at this event. I heard a great idea last night to solve the mining issue, is that when you have these massive industrial ships, there's no downside in using them. They just mine, like Kevin was saying, it's just more up and down the curve. But it doesn't really work like that in reality. Every time you use extremely big industrial methods, you ruin your environments at the same time. Like doing green sustainable farming is a lot of effort for better product, but doing industrial farming leave scorched earth behind. So the idea I heard about yesterday, which I found pretty cool, is that if the big industrial ships destroy the resources around them as they mine, so they would have a strip mining effect where for every mineral mined, they destroy 10 others from the rock you're mining from, or they cause a danger for the rock to explode, or cause a toxic cloud to be leave on a massive constellation level and things like that. And I think that's an interesting way to bring a counteraction where you would only mine in your enemy's territory with industrial mining, but at home you would be totally sustainable mining with lasers because you're like, it's your cottage industry and you're protecting your own region. So I think like this idea of like global warming, like scorched earth and so it are elements we need to bring more into the equation of like space, harmony and protection. So just an idea, Kevin.
Do I need to start texting people back in Iceland and...
They're probably panicking already.
Howdy, Captain Enzo from Tactical Supremacy. I was just wondering if there was any roadmap for the idea of Corp and Alliance roles to be ACL based instead of the current system?
That's something that we've spoken about. Team 50, we maintain a wish list of things, and one of them is a rework of corps and alliances, and in particular the roles, especially seeing as we worked on all those structures and the ACL system in the first place. It's unfortunately quite a long wish list, and so it's not quite at the top. There's other things that we want to do first, but it is something that we have spoken about. We'd really like to look at how you guys self-organize. I think it's really interesting, especially we often get requests to up the corp member list, member limits, because you guys like being in big groups, and that might solve it for a couple of groups, but isn't necessarily solves it for everyone. And so looking at how you guys self-organize and therefore how you need to share the types of access to certain things is an interesting puzzle, but it's not on our roadmap at the moment, unfortunately. It is something we think about, though.
Easy, thank you.
Nice to do.
Could you explain a little bit? I want to understand this a little more. Explain why you want to use ACL versus the corp role. Can you
Well, at the moment, the way the corp roles work is not very intuitive. Some roles affect things you wouldn't expect. Like, I believe to play with an iHub, you need structure management, but not the other roles, and then vice versa. And then for actual hangar access, you only have a so you've got your X number of hangars, and you used to be able to use home stations, but I don't believe that's currently working in Citadels.
Not at the moment, no.
So that limits you to one set of hangars.
But why do you want to use ACLs?
So then you could set each hangar individually, station specifically with an ACL list. So like, Bob can pull from this system, this hangar.
FCs get out of this hangar. Fueling logistics people get out of this hangar.
Okay, so you want to... It's
More
almost like...
For larger groups who have multiple structures where usually we think that the corp, and they just apply it to everybody, now they want to be able to
apply it to a
specific
certain
things to
structure,
certain either regions or to certain structures.
So it almost would be like in like network security, you would say like this particular folder has this particular like roles.
Yeah,
like if you think of like the
necessarily
NT,
need to be in a corp to be given access to a hangar.
I see. So
you could have
instead
like
of
a
taking the roles and
coalition.
applying to a corp, you want to take the roles and apply it to a specific container.
Yep.
I see. Okay.
Hello, Dunk Dinkle with Brave Newbies. So with the implementation of Raitarus and Soteus and Athenors and Tataras, there's been explosion, this huge democratization of industry in EVE, in which, as you brought up earlier, you can mine things pretty much everywhere and build what you need to build. And it's spread out from a very small, teeny crew that was involved in that gameplay to now pretty much every player in the game can participate in this. So that has been a very positive thing, especially for new players. They can build one thing, do that. So when I hear discussion of, well, maybe we need to restrict that and go back to everything has to go to JITA, we get the same effect like with contaminated Lorentz fluid, which is super expensive because it only comes out of one place. How do you balance the pain that people who want to engage in this would now endure of, I can't get it locally, I can't get this off a local market, versus we're going to create conflict because you have to go there? How do you balance those things? And I don't need the answer. I just, how do you decide?
So I'm going to deftly avoid answering that in specifics, but generally speaking, you need to have multiple levels of engagement. New players should be able to access most systems, not every system. I was about to say that, but that's not true. And there needs to be an entry point, and there needs to be things for them to do, but that does not necessarily mean that they have to do everything. So you can take a lot of that extra complication or extra steps and just bump it up so that it doesn't prevent you from getting involved with the system, it just prevents you from mastering it.
And do you think that leads to conflict, or does it just lead to more jump raiders in and out of JITA?
It honestly depends on how you, that depends on the specifics, which I don't think the person qualified to answer that is here.
Thank you.
Well, since nobody's qualified, I can just have opinions. I think what you're looking for, like in terms of, like you say, balance out, it's a misunderstanding that you can balance a game like EVE Online. There's no stable equilibrium that exists that is going to keep humans engaged. So you have to like balance, unbalance, and it's more about the movement and the change than it is bringing about some perfect balance. A perfectly balanced EVE Online would be that boring. We maybe are living in the current too balanced EVE Online. So there isn't like a solution to the problem, but the lack of movement, I would say, is the current issue. There's just some of these things have just gone too stagnant, and just changing them, even if it's bad changes, which I wouldn't necessarily promote, but they're better than no changes. That's I would say is the worst situation right now. It's just we are too indecisive because we are afraid to make mistakes, because it's extremely painful to make mistakes with design on EVE Online, but it's also extremely painful to just watch the game crystallize in action as it's currently doing.
I can't speak to the design side, but I can speak to the economic side, which is, I think a goal would be to have social mobility. Like there's a large concentration of wealth, but if a system can be designed by our wonderful designers that allows social mobility between the different strata, from new players to experienced players and what have you, and creative destruction in that system as well, to bring the people at the top perhaps down a couple of notches, I think that would be ideal.
Hi, I'm Vangelis from Wakagurung, Shootburst. I'm from LOSEC, and excluding faction warfare, I'm not involved in that, there's a distinct lack of kind of conflict drivers in LOSEC at the moment, especially since the moon mining changes. If you look at our Discord, it's all pings just about poking a structure or just trying to bait someone. It's all things we go out of our way to do to get a fight, rather than actually fighting over something that we want. Are there any thoughts or plans to introduce something desirable in LOSEC that big groups can really get stuck into each other over?
So her team has several plans to do that. A lot of them are currently on hold for various reasons, but we do recognize that it's important. And you mentioned excluding factional warfare. Redoing factional warfare is pretty high on a lot of people's lists, including our creative director. So I think rather than excluding factional warfare from the equation, we would be designing it to be more engaging to everyone and to provide those goals that you're talking about.
Brian Norris from Ironmire. So my Alliance CEO's asked me today, he asks, what if anything does CCP have on the horizon to help content creators of small groups be successful or even incentivised to put literal full-time job effort to make it happen in EVE?
I didn't catch the end of that, sorry.
So he wants to know what is on the horizon for the content creators of smaller groups to be successful or even incentivized to put in a literal full-time job effort to make it happen in EVE.
So we actually, for this year, had a program that we were working on, which unfortunately is on hold for right now. But we're trying to do different approaches and tactics to help surface content creators, especially either on Twitch or like fan sites, to provide them support, to basically allow them to do the things that they're doing best and help them get the exposure they need and bring the content they're doing closer to the players themselves. Like I cannot really give you any specifics right now, but we very much recognize that we can be doing a better job in terms of supporting our content creators. And this is something we want to be doing moving forward.
Hi, my name's Hugh Squigglebutt from Pookie's Passing Pleasure Seekers. I was wondering if there's metrics for player retention for players who immediately start playing the game with a friend, either that friend's new as well or experienced, and if there is that increased retention, some sort of buddy system for new players that can immediately team up with someone who's experienced at the game and possibly go through the various elements of EVE together, and then maybe eventually join the call with them or then help other people.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Yes, there is a buddy system, both for those that are invited into the game, that both the invitee and the inviter get rewards for, and there have also been some, I don't know how far they've gotten, but there's been a bunch of ideas of reworking that system because recruiting a friend or joining with a friend has such a big impact. There have been, sorry, this is ridiculous, I'm sorry. I know that, yeah, it's just better. We are focusing on that, and we're always trying to find the best way. There's also talk about trying to push people closer, or at least highlighting the community type initiatives where people join in small groups or go on open roams or things like that, because becoming involved with somebody who's going to teach you what to do, pull them through those early stages in the game has a huge impact on that. We also slightly, actually no, it doesn't matter. It's, yeah, sorry, I can't talk anymore. I'm ridiculous, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
Sword Dragon, member of Darkness and also one of the CSM members. With the election now coming and the people who have been announced, the one thing that we find as CSM members is we know how important we are to you. The problem is the player base doesn't know how important we are to you. And I would prefer that you guys would, when it comes to some of the NDA stuff, a little bit needs to be relaxed. But at least when it comes to the election time now, especially Hellmar, who sat with us before and explained how important you are to you, I think with the election coming, it would be very important to have the players know how you guys feel and how important it is to vote, even if it's not for me or any of the other CSM members that are here, but how important it is to have a healthy council that represents everybody, because everybody gets out and votes, and not just the blocks of the insinuation that only blocks vote.
Yeah, I totally agree in terms of us needing to do a better job in communicating the value that the CSM brings to us, and also the impact and all the different either ideas or things you guys are helping us with. I'm not entirely sure if changing the NDA is the way to go about it, but there are definitely different ways we can approach that subject.
Just to add on the NDA, it's not changing the NDA because the NDA is important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to give you any help. But the question that I have is sometimes there are people saying like, why are we so heavily bound by it? And I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but explaining what the NDA is to the CSM, and it's not just 3 letters, and what you expect from it, and what, as an agreement with both parties, why we agree to it and what comes from it. Like, it's not about removing it, but I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, I think the only real answer to this is just to onboard this. I think over the past sort of 2 to 3 years, the productive relationship between CCP and the CSM has increased massively. Like, we have gone up and down over the, whatever, 12 years we've had the current cycle of CSM. We actually had a CSM back in 2003 also, where we handpicked people, which is often forgotten. But since we rebooted it in its current form, it's gone all over the map, but the past 2 to 3 years have been extremely good, like extremely good. The past few CSMs have done a phenomenal job on building trust with the developers and vice versa, and it's in a zone apart from some recent elements, which maybe whatever, it's just is what it is. So I think maybe us doing a better job of expressing that outwards is probably something we have just assumed happens on its own. So I think what you're telling us is that we should do a better job of relating how productive it has been in the last 2 to 3 years, because sometimes it's been pretty tense, and that became more public when things are going really well. Nobody hears about them, but when they're going poorly, for sure people hear about it. So I would just say, like, the past 2 to 3 years have been really good, brought a lot of value, and we should just say that more. I guess there's no other answer than that.
So I have one more question that kind of links to that, because I know the answer to it, but it's obviously something that I want you to tell the players. When we went in January to the summit, it was a shock for the CSM to see so many new people at the company. It was uplifting. It was also good to see. Could you explain the positive aspects of Pearl Abyss having on CCP in this year and the future, and how you feel it's been had a positive effect on your company?
I mean, the reason why we partnered with Pearl Abyss is that CCP before was owned by investors, and investors eventually want to sell their shares, either by going public or selling to a strategic partner. And it does matter who owns the company. It just does. I've been a CEO for, what now, since 2004, whatever that is, 15 years. And it just does matter. And it was just the right time to change the ownership of the company. And we went through a whole process of doing that. And we talked to, I think, about 40 different entities. Yeah, let me get to it. It's a bit of a speech. Shanna can talk, so somebody has to talk. So, and out of that, we picked Pearl Abyss. And that, because they are MMO developers, passionate about MMOs, so are us, it allows us to do much more long-term investment, like I hope you're seeing in some of the things we're presenting now. Some of the things we're doing, especially on the tech side, make no sense unless you're building for decades to come. And that is a function of them really having an appreciation and understanding of what we do and how we do it and why it's important. And them also having a macro view on MMOs. Like, they are an MMO developer coming out of Korea, which is frankly the birthplace of MMOs, really, if you look at it, from Kingdom of the Winds over to Black Desert. So that just changes our posture much more, I think, than people realize. So that allows us to do more long-term investment in talent, do more long-term investment in tech, even if they don't bear fruit immediately. That it allows us to take a look at some of the fundamental aspects of EVE Online, which need to be taken a look at to build the game for decades to come.
So real quick, I want to take a step back. Talking about the CSM, I wanted to share a story. You asked us to more accurately talk about the good aspects of dealing with the CSM, and this one does not violate any NDAs because it's already shipped. So the last time the CSM came to Iceland, A week or so before, CCP Rise had come to me, I'm the design director for those of you who don't know, and said that he wanted to do some ship rebalancing, and he had a list. And I told him, no, it does not fit in our 2019 goals. Came back a week or so later and said, the CSM wants to talk about this, and they have a lot of the same ideas that I do. And so it's like the CSM is bringing it to us, we're honor bound to sort of pay attention and listen to it and give it a fair shake. And we did. We had one meeting, and then at the end of that meeting, the decision was made. It was like, okay, now go back and talk about specifics in a second meeting, because we're absolutely doing this now. So the recent ship rebalance is an example of the CSM coming to us with concerns that we knew were problems, but were not high on our to-do list, and changing our priorities and creating a positive effect.
Yeah, Manny Ortega, Beer Brewers Cooperative. While I applaud what CCP have done for those with vision impairment, you might say, is there any add-on that can be done for those in the actual gameplay itself? Because you also have not just those with colour blindness, but also with things such as photophobia, where you have going into a system, you've got bright lights coming straight at their face, rather than have to wear something like yellow glasses or red tinted glasses and things like that. And can that be addressed in some manner in the game?
So I can't directly answer that question because I'm not the art director, but I have seen technology in the past couple of weeks that we've been working on, which could be used to do that, or I should say might be used to do that. I'm not the art director, so I don't know that for sure. And I did talk to you yesterday, and I'm absolutely going to bring your concerns to the attention of the art director.
I'll apologise for sending all that hollow porn last night.
No apologies necessary for last night from anybody, hopefully. I'll make mention quickly, because it's not just an art concern. Some of those issues are quality concerns as well, which I know that the color blindness mode that was implemented was heavily advocated both by the team that worked on it, and specifically their QA, who is CCP The Funk, who is tremendous, and I hope he's at home watching. But we all push for improving accessibility for EVE Online, and whether that's making tweaks to our settings to enable people to adjust the things that they see, or the things that their system, whether it's biological or technological, can handle. We like introducing that stuff. We love opening the game up to people, to anyone. And if it's simple, if it's something like putting on a filter or reducing flashing effects that might cause reactions for some people, we'll certainly, I mean, it's a no-brainer to take that on board and to investigate how to apply it, and then to go ahead and move on that. When it becomes more complex, we want to get it right. And that's what really takes up the bulk of time there. The color blindness mode was not a simple addition. There were a lot of other changes that needed to take place, both with visual assets and with UI elements, in order to make sure that it worked. And we don't like putting something out there and saying, hey, here we go, and not having it do the job that it needs to do. So that's one of the key blockers there, is making sure that what we deliver does what it says on the tin and provides for the people that it needs to provide for.
Last question. Yes, just one more.
Hi, Zane, Tickle. So China has a server, Serenity, is that correct? So there's talk about Chinese community coming over to Tranquility. So I'm wondering if that means anything to you, or it's just business as usual.
So we have long wanted to integrate the communities of Serenity and Tranquility together. So it could be one community, even if it's two separate servers. And I think the fact that it's taken us a while to transition in China has opened up this situation where the Chinese players are kind of integrating the communities for us. I think that's a really positive thing. And it seems to be a very positive thing here in Australia because you guys share our time zone. So there's more action in your time zone. So I think it's great. So
does the Chinese community get the same sort of exposure that you're doing for us? Like, I don't seem to hear much about, like, you're travelling to China to meet. Like, what are the numbers like compared to Tranquility versus Chinese servers?
So right now we're in a closed beta in the transition in China. So I mean the DAU is actually quite high, but we can't really comment on it in any detail until we go through the license application, which the government has now started to approve games, and even if they're doing it at a slower rate than before, I think we are pretty high in the stack, for lack of a better word. So once we're through that, then we will start to communicate more about what we will do in China with NetEase, which will be different than what we did in China with TN City.
Wingnut Cross, naked oil bodybuilders. Yeah, I know. So a quick question about the AT. You mentioned the last AT when we had to close it that you were going to help out with player-run tournaments. But with the Thunderdome being destroyed, we had anger games not work. We had trouble with Streamfleet Showdown. When's the tool going to be functional and working, I guess?
So first of all, the tournament tool was never a part of the support that we're offering for this year. One of the reasons why we've put a hold on AT was exactly to reevaluate our options and the way we can be doing things. The tournament tool was one of the blockers that we kind of identified, like the state of it. It's not being in a way that it's allowing us to properly actually run tournaments and also give it to the community itself. We haven't had the concrete discussions for the next year just yet, as we're strongly focusing on the World Tour and everything that is happening right now. But we very much are trying to help the community organizers to run their events or tournaments this year, obviously with the tools and the resources that we have right now.
There is just one more guy that has a question, so we'll just let him ask his question, and then you guys can finally get off the stage.
Sorry, Mossy. Hi, Hellmar. Just one comment and a question. Like, you guys have mentioned you have a roadmap, but I've counted 25 pieces right now that are on your roadmap. The question I have is, Jitter's a choke point economically. I think a lot of the war deck behavior and a lot of this sort of behavior in general seems to consolidate around the Jitter sort of perimeter regions and so forth. Have you guys given much thought to a way you can displace that? So send things out to more regional areas and sort of break the back of that thing a little bit more to disperse content?
I guess that comes back to how we were talking earlier, or how Hellmar was talking earlier. There's definitely a need for change, things staying the same way, but also I know it's now going to be counter to what he says about the fear of changing certain things. When you have something like Jitter and perimeter to some extent around it, which has basically become what it is because of your actions in game, if we come along and start poking holes in things and changing things in ways that we don't look at all the aspects that are there, it's there's no telling what will happen, which in some cases is good and in other cases is bad. It's just, I think in HiSec it's a little bit different because that's where all of our new players are. And so creating so much chaos in a place that we can't predict what's going to happen. And we also need to make sure that we have not necessarily safe, but certainly a space that we can, that newer players can at least predict what will happen as they're learning the game. It becomes difficult if we shake up too much in the safe space.
I would very much agree with Shauna, because like in the outer space of Human Line, it should be Wild West and it should be chaotic, dangerous and all that. But the flip side is where HiSec space comes in. It's like it's a very human thing to develop stable structure there. Like Rome is Rome, it's been Rome for 2,000 years. and it's there, and you can depend on it, and it's part of the legacy. So I actually think how Jira has become this massive trade hub, which is completely emergent. Nobody picked Jira as being a trade hub, and I guess it was July before, and we tried to break that up with when we broke up July, and then we got Jira. So I think we would rather lean into the fact that Jira has become like a NASDAQ or a New York Stock Exchange, and I would rather build that up as the sort of, here's where the massive, secure, large-scale trading occurs, and then you will not have a natural dynamics of flowing from the outer regions into the main trade market, which is, again, is a very human pattern that just emerges. So as much as I would like to fox it up in the outer regions, I would like to build up a high-sec space even more to lean into what you guys are built in terms of infrastructure there.
Just quickly follow up, but if you were to consolidate in terms of high-sec, in terms of new players in that area, to sort of cultivate and nurture and sort of create a bit of an incubation system going, but the history and the behavior today is that's where most of these people feed on that behavior too. So they will do the negatives, not just the positives. So things like ganking, knowing full well the Concord has delays or has queue delays that get to it. So it kind of creates this feeding behavior as well, as much as a positive and a negative. So wouldn't that keep going then? And that would be counterintuitive to the whole life cycle growth of a new player?
Yeah, and I guess it then becomes more of a discussion about what's the evolution of a city. As city becomes, as everybody floods in and grows and everybody becomes merchant class and starts to prosper and get more. But then the wealth inequality starts to seep in and you get your slums. Sorry, I'm not trying to offend anybody who might. But you get that stage where the different types of behaviors and people will feed on other people and therefore you add a different type of ecosystem within that space. And so letting that keep its own evolution to see where that would progress to. Because as we said, we didn't make Jita, you guys did, and how that evolves and what happens when those that live here revolt or those I don't know. It's what happens if that city is allowed to become a metropolis or take over an even larger area of space. I think it's one of the stories of Eve that you guys keep creating that keeps going on, and Jita's one of those evolving stories. And so letting it do its own thing is probably we'll just have to see where it goes.
All right, thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. And
could I say one more thing? Sorry.
No.
So, pretty please. So, on your last point about safety of new players, the problem is not that Jita is not safe for new players or that any system is not safe for new players. The problem is that we have systems to message how safe a system is right now. If you go to the right place at the right time, you can look and you can see how many people were killed in the last hour in any system in Eve. The problem is that we don't message that well to new players. And so a lot of these problems are solvable and need to be solved, but not necessarily in the most direct, traditional way that we've solved them in the past.
All right, thank you very much to everybody who asked questions and to our lovely panel on the stage. If your question wasn't answered, there will be a 2-hour AMA in the roundtable room with CCP Mimic. The shirts have arrived, so as you leave today, you can go and collect your shirts. We'll be back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. a late start for everybody who has a hangover. And we'll see you guys then. Thanks very much. Have a great night.